What's up everybody? Welcome back to another video. I am Ryan Beach, and as you can see today I am joined by my lovely wife Kathleen Costello. For those of you that don't know her, Kathleen is the principal clarinetist with the Alabama Symphony Orchestra. She also teaches at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and she maintains a private studio here in our home as well. In this video we're going to be talking about flow state. Recently, we've both become much more aware of how important flow state is and even like what it is and the experiences we've had that might have indicated we were in flow state, and we think it's just incredibly important to talk about, so we wanted to share that with you today.
Lately, I've been digging deep into the research on flow state. Most of my research is based on the book Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Flow state is not specific to one activity. Rather, it's more of an observation of how it feels to be so engaged in an activity that it would trigger flow state for you. Experts have done many studies on flow, and through these studies, they've discovered that there are 8 primary elements of flow that are common across all types of activities and all genres. We thought it would be great to make a video today that would apply some of these ideas and these elements to our practice sessions and our lives as musicians.
Before we dive into these 8 components of flow, I did want to mention that as we go through them, the first 4 that we talk about will sort of lend themselves well to things that you can design in your own practice sessions, things that you have a little bit of control over. And then the second group of 4 that we'll talk about, 5 through 8, are more indications that you have experienced flow, or if you're lucky enough to be aware that you're actually in flow. We think it's important to sort of categorize these in this way so that we can understand how the first 4 affect the second 4. Let's get into the video.
The first component of flow state is that flow state usually occurs when confronted with a task that we have a chance of completing. If we assess that a particular task will be too hard for us to complete, we most likely will not pursue that activity. When applying it to our practice sessions, we can be proactive and design for flow by making sure that we are setting tasks that we have a chance of completing. We need to be honest and real with ourselves and our abilities. This will help us choose appropriate tasks relative to our current performance ability. When managing progress, we look to stay in the Goldilocks zone, which that just means it's not too easy and it's not too hard. If it's too easy, we fall into boredom. If it's too hard, we become frustrated and we want to quit. One example of what it looks like to set a goal is to get really organized before you go to practice. We want to make a plan and stick to it. We can help ourselves by asking ourselves questions like, where will I practice? When will I practice? What will I practice? So, as far as the what goes, what exact material will you practice, including which sections? What tempo will you practice it at? What tempo do you want to reach by the end of your practice session? How many repetitions of the material will you perform? What practice techniques will you use to help you reach your goal? Often when we leave a practice session feeling really frustrated and maybe like we haven't gotten anything done, or maybe we've even gone backwards, often this particular quality is at the root of the problem. We've chosen a task that's too hard and we've expected too much of ourselves in that one practice session.
The second component of flow that we're going to talk about in this video is that we must be able to concentrate on the task at hand. When you're an outside observer seeing someone who's in flow state, it can look pretty effortless actually. That's one of the ways that you kind of know. You see someone who's just doing it and it seems like everything's in balance and there's no problem. But for that person in flow, it can often be very physically strenuous, and it can be very, very mentally taxing to be able to stay in that state and maintain it. When we're applying this to our practice sessions, it has numerous applications. Because we live in a world of distraction, this is going to be our biggest enemy in terms of being able to concentrate on the task at hand. Things like cell phones, things like social media, or children if you're a parent, or maybe you have work and school stress, like all of us know exactly what that's like. These things are going to take away from our ability to block those things out and focus on the task at hand. All of those distractions that I mentioned, we could call those external distractions, and they're important to mitigate or to remove, but also we have internal distractions as well. This is going to be things like our internal self-talk, especially if it's negative. This can definitely distract us, and if we have emotional or sort of reactive practicing, things feel bad so we kind of freak out, and those kinds of things can also be a detriment to our ability to stay objective and focus on the task at hand. One example of what this could look like in your practice session for external distractions would be to turn your cell phone on airplane mode if it's a distraction for you. If it's not, don't worry about it. But if it is, that's a solution that you can control that can dramatically help your concentration on the task. For internal distractions, something like this emotional reactive practicing, being able to drive some objectivity and focus on what the task is and letting that be the thing that keeps you non-emotional and more sort of logical about the process, that could be a possible solution for you if you struggle with that.
The third component of flow is that concentration is usually possible because we have clear goals. Developing clear goals gives us a clear plan of action. That means when we're applying it to our practice sessions, we need to be clear about what our objective is for any given activity or exercise that we are undertaking. So for me, I play long tones every day as a clarinetist. Many of us do. And instead of just playing the long tones through and just checking it off of my fundamentals list, I really try to keep in mind that I'm trying to create a beautiful, focused, clear sound in all registers with absolute control in all dynamic ranges. Having clear goals ultimately will help us build a strong mental model for our playing and our practicing. The mental model is so important because that is the blueprint from which we will draw all of our information that's going to drive our adjustments that we make in the practice room and our improvement ultimately.
The fourth component of flow is that having clear goals allows us to get immediate feedback in our process. I think it's no secret that without feedback and the ability to get feedback within the work that we're doing, it's really difficult to gauge whether we are improving, whether we're moving closer to our goals, or whether we're just sort of spinning our wheels in place. In his book, Csikszentmihalyi talks about some objective ways that we would get feedback, and he uses rock climbers as an example of how their clear goal is to scale the rock face that they're climbing, and their immediate feedback is they're doing well, they're being successful if they haven't fallen off the cliff into the ravine below. So that's pretty obvious that they're being successful, but it's not always as obvious for other people in other disciplines like us musicians. Our discipline is much more subjective than that, so it's incredibly important that when we apply it to our practice sessions, that we are aiming to not only be clear with our goals, but very, very specific, so that we have some objective metrics of what progress would look like and we can get feedback very, very quickly. Kathleen mentioned in the previous point that having clear goals can help us develop a strong mental model, and this point is an extension of that. If we have a strong mental model and we then perform in the practice room, we can just ask ourselves what's different between what we did and what the mental model is. We don't have to say I'm bad because I can't do what I want to do, or I feel great because I can. It's just what's different between what I did and what I want. This can help us be much more objective with the process and help with some of that negative self-talk and that emotional reactive practicing that we mentioned earlier.
As we mentioned earlier, these first 4 components of flow state are ones that we have a little more control over when we're going to design how we're going to run our practice session for that day, or maybe even week, month, etc. The next 4 components that we're going to talk about will be more evidence that we have been in flow, and we can look back and compare our experience to these 4 qualities and see if it lines up. These components reveal the deeply enjoyable nature of flow state, and as we discuss them, you'll likely recognize them as experiences you've had yourself, and it could be from any range of activities. The 5th component of flow is that a person in flow acts with a deep but effortless involvement that removes them from their awareness of the worries and frustrations of everyday life. This seems to be the result of being able to concentrate on the task at hand. The person in flow forgets that there are other responsibilities, anxieties, outside distractions due to their complete involvement with the task they are engaged in. For me, this happens the most easily when I sit down to draw or create some art. For whatever reason, I get into flow state quite easily when I draw, and I often find myself forgetting about everything else that's going on in my life, and sometimes my kids even have trouble getting my attention when I'm in the middle of it.
The 6th component of flow we're going to talk about in this video is that these enjoyable experiences actually allow people to exercise a sense of control over their actions. In general, we're never really going to know the outcome of the actions we take, but spending time in this really hyper-focused, detail-oriented way allows us to gain a pretty intimate knowledge of the action or the task that we are undertaking, and so it gives us this sense of we know it, we know every detail, and we know almost what's going to happen. So even though we can't guarantee the future, we feel like we have an actual ability to sort of control the outcome of whatever action we take. The more time we spend in this state, it's going to give us a sense of we know our playing, we know how things are going to go, and that we actually have control over our performances and our auditions, things of that nature.
The seventh component of flow is what we would call a loss of self-consciousness. Yet paradoxically, we also develop a further complexity of self when we exit flow state. While in flow, concentration on the task at hand is so great that we cease to exist. It's not about us and how good or bad we are, but simply focusing on our goals and doing our best to improve with objectivity. When playing in an ensemble, this feeling can be how we feel connected to our peers. We realize it's about sharing the music together and not necessarily about how well we shared it or how well one of us shined above another. This growth, this personal growth we experience in flow state, is how we leave a sense of flow state with a stronger sense of self, thus adding complexity to our consciousness.
The eighth and final component of flow we're going to discuss in this video is that the sense of time can be altered. Hours can pass by in minutes, and minutes can stretch out to seem like hours. An example of hours seeming to go by in minutes, for me this is maybe playing a concert. The 2.5-hour concert seems to go by in a blink of an eye. It was enjoyable, we just went through it once, it goes by pretty quick. For an example of what minutes can stretch into hours can be, I found this quote from Mario Williams, who is a defensive end on the Miami Dolphins, and he had this to say: "No matter how fast or slow you get to the quarterback, it all goes to slow motion when you get there. Everything just stops. You don't see anything but the quarterback. You don't hear anything but the quarterback's breath. It's almost like you're a shark. Your eyes get real big and everything gets quiet." From my experience with talking with other people about flow state, this experience seems to be one of the most common ways that people will describe flow state, just this altered sense of time, and that it can be almost surreal to feel that kind of thing. And because many of us have felt it, that's what flow state feels like. So if you've done it, you've been in flow state.
It's really important to note that we can't force our way into flow state. It's much more about the way that we've designed or approached our activity that we've chosen to engage in that will yield or allow us to be in flow state as a result. We're going to put all the components of flow up on the screen again, but this time we're going to separate them into a few categories. Those categories are efficient, effective, and enjoyable. By increasing our efficiency and our effectiveness in our practice, we have the best chance to enter flow state and enjoy our practice as well.
All right, everybody, that's going to be all for this episode. Thank you so much, Kathleen, for joining me on my channel. I hope you all enjoyed hearing her perspective on flow state. If you did enjoy the video or you had any feelings at all, I would appreciate it if you gave it a like down below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of the content on this channel. And we talk about stuff like this all the time, so I hope you do subscribe and find the rest of the content awesome as well. If you have any questions about what we talked about, I'll leave a link down below to a free 30-minute meeting that you can have with me where we can talk about flow state, how it affects your practice, or if you'd actually like to speak with Kathleen and get her perspective on it, maybe she'd be willing to do it as well. What do you think?
Sure.
Well, there you have it right there. Sure. So if you want to do that, make sure you fill that out. I would love to chat with you. Kathleen would love the opportunity to chat with you and support you in whatever way we can. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. Always remember, stay strong, be kind to yourself, never stop growing, and we'll see you in the next video.